So kicking and screaming, and with much anger and frustration, the Washington State Democrats, who control both houses of the state legislature, they did indeed pass 3 of the Let's Go Washington sponsored initiatives into law yesterday on Monday. Both houses did this. Now, the other 3 initiatives, they're going to be on the ballot in November. So let's discuss the drama, the hard left opposition, the tactical retreats, and the whole drama behind the scenes. Now, as predicted last week in a video that we did, both the Washington State Legislature and the State Senate overwhelmingly approved the 3 Let's Go Washington sponsored by Brian Heywood PAC initiatives on Monday of this week. And it was quick. It was actually bipartisan. Every Republican voted for all 3, of course, and then most Democrats actually joined them in both houses. Now, the Democrat Party leadership hopes everybody forgets about it and doesn't view this as a tactical retreat that it truly represents for them. At the same time, we need to recognize this as the victory for common sense and sanity, which this truly represents right now. Now, I also want to discuss how these initiatives have helped the politicians out themselves, basically, especially those who were the pro-crime and pro-criminal caucus within the Democratic Party. So this has kind of outed them. And just a quick recap for those who are kind of late to this party and who really don't know what I'm discussing. The Washington State Constitution since 1912 has allowed for the citizen initiative process. And this includes the opportunity for citizens to collect enough qualifying signatures for initiative legislation that can be submitted to the legislature first in order to give them an opportunity to pass it unmodified as law, or the initiative goes on to the ballot unchanged in November. Now, in Washington State, we recently completed the largest conservative signature gathering effort in American history. And, of course, certainly in state history, as over 420,000 plus signatures were gathered for 6 different initiatives last year. This actually represented a total of nearly 2.7 million signatures and 800,000 different voters who signed these initiative petitions to fix what has been broken by the political class in Washington State. Now, if you need more background info, I've linked to the website, the Let's Go Washington PAC, down below, as well as previous videos that we've produced on the subject. So now, as I discussed in our video last week, well, the Washington State Democrats and their kind of state-approved media allies were vehemently opposed to all 6 initiatives when they first landed on their desk just a few months ago, and, of course, during the signature gathering efforts last year. So then, upon deeper reflection, many strategy sessions, and of course, they were spending large sums of money with focus groups and surveys, the Democrats in the legislature decided to change their minds and their direction, which included this basic tactical retreat from their reflexive opposition, and they decided to pass, or at least allow to pass, 3 of these initiatives into law. Now, the 3 initiatives that have now been passed by both the State Senate and the House are, first, a restoration of police pursuit of criminals. It's amazing that we have to do this. This is I-2113, and that was passed. A parental bill of rights that gives parents access to previously secret data about their children in the school and the medical system. This is I-2081. This also passed. And a preemptive prevention of any income tax in Washington State at any level of government. This is I-2111. Now, officially, all 3 of these become law in 90 days, and Governor Inslee is kind of aced out of the process, and there is just nothing that he can do about it. Now, I call this an obvious tactical retreat by the Democrats because they all were angry, upset, and then furious when these initiative signatures were submitted to the Washington State Secretary of State in November and December of last year. Every single Democrat and leftist organization, and I know there really isn't probably much difference between them, but they all came out last year in strong opposition to all of these initiatives. But the Democrats were given a free pass now by the hard left to pass some of these initiatives just Monday because they plan to now focus their anger, their money, and their campaign fights against the remaining 3 initiatives, which actually impact their tax-extracting, kind of cash-grifting schemes. And in the end, when you study how these guys think, you will rapidly realize it is all about the money, and it always will be. So the remaining 3 initiatives will be on the ballot in November, but for those who worked so hard to gather these signatures last year, and I know there's just a ton of you out there right now, many of you are watching this video right now, these votes on Monday, these have ensured that you have at least 3 victories now before the election even gets here in November. Now, this is actually a really big deal, and we are making history really at every single step of this process. Now, while all three of these initiatives were approved with this kind of bipartisan vote, making every Republican and a sizable percentage of Democrats who were voting to approve these initiatives, the floor votes did actually help us to expose the worst of the worst legislators that Washington State has ever placed in the state legislature, I believe anyway. And this was particularly true with the common sense and very popular restoration of police pursuit, which was Initiative 2113. And this is where the pro-crime and the pro-criminal caucus of the Democratic Party, they finally really outed themselves in this kind of rabid hatred of the police and law and order in our communities. So let's talk about this weird group of people who seem so intent to harm as many people in our communities as they can with their public policy agenda. So really just starting in the Washington State Legislature, and I realize this is a lot of people here, but I'll go through this. The pro-crime and pro-criminal caucus of the Democratic Party consists of Representative Alvarado, Representative Bateman, who's actually formerly of the super corrupt Olympia City Council, of which I've got more experience than I ever really want, Representative Berry, Representative Chop, who's actually a Seattle legislator, who was the former Speaker of the House before Jenkins, and really one of the first legislators that I was able to force Attorney General Bob Ferguson to sue back in 2017 for breaking Washington State's campaign finance laws. And it's a case that Representative Chop had to settle for $8,100, including the personal funds that he had to reimburse his campaign. Just kind of a trip down memory lane right now. And then we have Representative Entenman and Representative Farivar, Representative Fitzgibbon, Representative Gregerson, who's the former mayor of SeaTac, who was actually voted out of office while she was in the legislature in 2015, and who I've frequently caught breaking campaign finance laws many times in the past. You also had Representative Marcy, Representative Mena, Representative Morgan, no relation to me, but who is currently under investigation based on complaints that I filed with the Public Disclosure Commission just for a massive and wide-ranging series of campaign finance violations. You had Representative Ormsby here, who's a legislator from Spokane, who I've also caught breaking the law a number of times in the past, but who has only received naughty letters from the PDC. You have Representative Pullett, who's a legislator who was given a formal warning notice sanctioned just a few years back based on a complaint that I filed against him. Also, of course, catching him breaking the state's campaign finance laws. You had Representative Reed. And then, of course, you also had Representative Ryu, Representative Santos, who was actually fined $900 back in 2020 based on a 2017 PDC complaint that I actually filed against her for campaign violations at that time. And then wrapping it all up there is Representative Sen, Representative Simmons, Representative Street, and Representative Thai. Now, there it is. This is the Washington State's Democratic pro-crime and pro-criminal caucus in the House. And it always helps to know who supports the criminals over you. Now, when we go over into the other side of the Capitol, in the Washington State Senate side of things, the pro-crime and the pro-criminal Democratic caucus there consists of Democrat Party Senators Dingra, basically a King County prosecutor who really apparently loves to unleash violent criminals on the future victims in our state, and who's currently running for Washington State Attorney General. And it'd be hard to find somebody worse to be in that position. It also includes Senator Frame, Senator Hasagawa, soon-to-be retired Senator Sam Hunt, who's actually a politician from Olympia and who has a long and storied history of violating both Washington State's ethics laws and also the campaign finance laws. And actually, he's the guy who really inspired me to start filing public disclosure complaints in the first place way back in 2016. And I was also able to convince A.G. Ferguson to sue Senator Sam Hunt for his law breaking at that time, a case which he settled for $6,400 back in 2017. You also had Senator Cooterer, who basically is another politician I caught breaking the law, but she also only got a naughty letter. See PDC enforcement case 28824 if you want to learn more. I'll try to link to that down below. Then you also have Senator Lovelet, Senator Nguyen, Senator Nobles, Senator Pedersen, Senator Saldana, who is basically another politician I caught breaking Washington State's campaign finance laws, but who only got a naughty letter from the PDC for her law breaking at that time. You have Senator Trudeau, who's, as far as I know, no relationship to Canada's failed Prime Minister, Senator Valdez, and Senator Wellman. So that's it. This is the pro-crime and pro-criminal caucus in the Washington State Senate. However, keep in mind, regardless of how much these guys want to dump violent criminals back into our communities, they actually lost this recent vote. And they were outvoted by a majority of Republicans and sometimes, even reluctantly, some of these sane Democrats who thought restoring the duty of the police to chase criminals was actually a good idea. So, okay, the real question is, what happens now? Now, the governors essentially just cut out of the loop on these initiatives to the legislature. They basically become law without his signature, and there's really nothing he can do about it. So keep in mind, this was a historic and unusual victory for common sense and a reversal of just some really stupid and dumb policies that were championed by the Democrats in Washington state. I'm going to point out that the Washington state legislature has only approved over a half dozen initiatives to the legislature in the past 110 years. So, and only once back in 1995 did they ever pass more than one in one legislative session. I mean, this is historic. So Monday's vote was historic, and it did set a new state record as 3 initiatives to the legislature were approved all at one time, and they essentially become law in 90 days. Now, could these 3 approved initiatives become derailed in some way? Well, it's actually hard to see how that can happen at this point in time. Theoretically, someone could try to run a referendum in the next 90 days against them, but that would be expensive. It would cost millions of dollars. And my critique against referendums, which mainly is the fact that the language is essentially very confusing and the effort's very high for this confusing campaign with a difficult outcome. So I'm not sure the left really wants to go through that type of expensive fight in addition to the battles they already face in November. But it's theoretically possible, and in fact, the Seattle Times, as they kind of bemoaned this recent vote by the legislature, they seem to try to be calling out for this outcome. However, I find that really to be unlikely, although it could be fun to waste more leftist cash in kind of a forlorn hope like that. I just don't see it happening. No, actually, I think the real battle now shifts to the other 3 initiatives, which the Democrats wouldn't even consider in the legislature right now because they all threaten some serious tax cash grift grabs. You know, they're basically these grifting schemes, and some of which basically inevitably gets recycled back into their pockets as campaign contributions. Now, as I've said many times, it's all about the money. And there's just no greed more rapacious or greater than the insatiable greed of government. And the lefties who profit from the taxes that they extract from the people, they're going to protect their cash flow as really their highest priority. And they're proving that right now. So in November, you will see the following 3 initiatives on the ballot. Number 1, the first one's going to be allowing people to opt out of the payroll tax, supposedly for long-term care, but in reality just a screwed up mess of a program that even the Seattle Times said was a disaster. Now, the Dems didn't really care about that because SEIU, which is one of the main puppet masters and financial backers of the Democrats in Washington state, SEIU views this horrible and regressive law as kind of their cash cow, forcing people to join their union against their will and then extracting campaign cash from these reluctant members, and then recycling that cash, of course, into the campaign coffers of the Democrats. This initiative doesn't actually kill this policy. It just gives people the ability to have the choice to opt out of it if they don't want to be in it. And since most people realize that it is a crappy and horrible program, everyone, even the supporters, know that so many people will abandon the scam, it will just collapse in failure. And, of course, this will be Initiative 2124, and SEIU and the Democrats will need to spend millions of dollars in an attempt to defeat it, and they may fail regardless of how much money they spend, which gets us to number 2. Now, this one is actually the most popular of all these initiatives, and this is 2117, which is the Stop the Hidden Gas Tax scam that Inslee and the Democrats forced upon the people of Washington after the people had actually voted this stupid idea down twice as an initiative in the past. The most recently being I-1631, which was an initiative which I actually challenged the ballot title at the time, and I wrote an article about this, and I forced the Enviros to spend lots of cash on their attorneys, but which I was not able to fix the flawed ballot title at the time back in 2018. But this actually failed miserably at the ballot box that November. So as a volunteer who more recently last year spent some time at fairs and other locations, just like many of you, collecting signatures myself, I can guarantee that this one right here was one of the most popular initiatives out there. And it's laughable that the lefties are actually pretending that this one isn't popular. I mean, listen, people don't like it when their gas tax just goes up, even in a sneaky hidden way like this Inslee program. And of course, Bob Ferguson, Washington State's current AG who wants to be governor, he also outed himself once again as the dishonest guy he actually is when he forced Puget Sound Energy and others to conceal the cost increase that this program made to the cost of natural gas and then heating costs for homeowners in Washington State. However, the crew supporting this tax scam, they're dedicated to keeping the grift going, basically as long as they can, because it represents big dollars. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar tax gravy train, and every scam artist and big-dollar donor to the Democratic Party, they are riding this train to get their snouts into the pig trough and extract, of course, their cash from this one. So many people suspect that Governor Inslee, at the same time, has lined up his future post-governor employment with one of the recipients of kind of this scam tax here, which is something Inslee refuses to deny or even address. So due to its obvious popularity, it's going to take $30 million or more to run any kind of a dishonest campaign against this one. And I'm really just not sure that there's enough money to support this scam out there. I think it will still pass no matter how much money they throw at it. Now, finally, you have the capital gains tax scam. That's going to be in the final one of the three Let's Go Washington-sponsored initiatives on the ballot. And again, this was just another dishonest tax that required a completely corrupted and English-tortured Washington State Supreme Court to remain on the books right now, since it is so obviously in violation of 100 years of judicial interpretation of Washington State's Constitution until last year. But at the same time, this is also another grant-grifting tax extracting scam tax, really, that Democrat Senator Pedersen admitted in recently uncovered emails. He said it's really just a backdoor income tax for the state of Washington. And of course, we saw Jeff Bezos' recent departure from Washington State. It so clearly exposes the targeted rich people who are supposed to actually pay this tax. They're just going to change their official residency to a different state so they don't have to pay it. And then the threshold for paying the scam tax will, of course, inevitably be lowered, so that big government can then capture middle-income farmers and businessmen with this tax. This has produced a cash pile of $750 million just this last year alone. So in addition to the multi-billion-dollar surplus the state's wasted lately, but, well, the state doesn't really need this money. It's still real money that can be recycled into future campaign contributions by the state in their grant-grifting operations. Now, we have to remember this November, the people supporting these initiatives will be the political insiders and the grant grifters who are directly profiting, or they plan to profit, at the expense of the regular people of Washington State, like you and I, who they despise and who our political elite only views cash cows to be milked until dry. Now, this is going to be a crazy November election for sure. And with these three initiatives at the top of the ballot, even above the presidential race, we are sure to be seeing some aggressive campaigning by the left to kind of keep these cash spigots open. However, that campaign essentially starts in a few weeks, and instead of 6 initiatives, we should take the win on the existing 3 and then focus on the 3 that are going to save us a heck of a lot of money come November. Now, very few people watching this video today would have thought any of this was possible a year ago. Nobody, really. Certainly none of the political insiders thought this could happen even just a few months ago. And the surprising successes of the Let's Go Washington effort has really changed everything in the legislature and for the upcoming November election. Now, I know it isn't easy to make an impact. It never is, and it never has been. I suspect Americans tend to be infected with this kind of unrealistic idea that you can change the world over the course of a 2-hour Sunday afternoon special. But the reality is it just takes time, effort, and often thankless hard work. It took a lot of effort by a lot of people. Many of you watching this video, you know who you are. As thankless as that effort might have felt at the time, especially last year, the successes that we're witnessing today are happening as a direct result of you being willing to show up, invest your money sometimes, and absolutely your time. And that is actually the moral of the story here. We can't guarantee success, but we can work to set up the potential for success. And those of us who supported these 6 initiatives, we must recognize that so far, we actually already have a 50% success rate, with the rest now depending on what happens in November. We still must show up to make the November election successful for the remaining initiatives, and of course to reduce our cost of living and just stop a lot of tax grifting operations in the state. These are all worthwhile goals, but they won't happen on their own. There is just no autopilot. There's actually still quite a bit of work to do. And, of course, like everything, it will require us to continue to show up because the future belongs to those who show up.